Yeah, I love the numbers. I love when you guys break it down and I learned something. And I mean, it was really good. It was really, really good. The people, let me put up some of their thoughts here as I wait to welcome. Yes, way to welcome somebody telling us about the $300 that you were talking about, Mr. Strickland. But we're gonna go right into Mr. Strickland. Oh, Deborah Seeley saying they promised a 300 give her. Oh, and then she wanted to know if they gave it out as yet. I don't even know. But what happened here? Listen, Dave. Okay, the child is 14 years old. But there is, I think people got mixed up because they have a 11-year-old brother that is speaking with the police, telling them what they saw, is what I saw earlier. Well, we thank God that the child is prayerfully recovering. Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Okay, well, Mrs. Strickland is here, and Mrs. Strickland is going to be talking to us about NIS because we've got to understand what is happening. And this is an educational program. We're talking about sickness and injury, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Correct. Correct.
Yes, sir. So over to you. Over to you.
Um, Good night, Madam Principal. Good night, Marcia in the loyal opposition.
Yes, sir.
I had to say that because I sat and I listened to Marcia just now, and I could listen to her for the rest of the night. Honest, because being part of civil society, we are necessary more so than ever. And my prayers are with those who were hurt in Nelson Street, for those who are grieving over the loss of loved ones. And therefore, we as a people, we are still a very much a united nation, a nation that is united. Let me put it that way. Okay, the last time I was on the program, I looked at the catastrophe, which is the resilience levy,
Mm,
which Senator Walters just alluded to. But tonight, I want to continue our Wednesday discussion in respect of sickness and injury. And we agreed that we would try to have this discussion every um, Wednesday
Wednesday.
night, every Wednesday night, so that I'm going to be breaking it down in these small sections because it is important for persons to understand the whole issue of sickness benefits. And even though I'm going to say things that individuals may take for granted, it's necessary to be said. Now, we know that if you are sick in Barbados, if you're not well for whatever reason, you um, will call into the workplace
Yes.
and you would indicate, well, I'm not able to come to work today because I'm not feeling well. And that's a responsibility that you have to your employer. The second day, you must call to indicate to your employer that I'm not coming to work today because of illness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before the close of work on the third day, if you have not submitted a medical certificate to your employer, then you have terminated your own services, irrespective of the reason. In other words, you gave the claim to an individual who somewhat forgot it. If the employer has not received it by the end of the work day, then the employer can determine that you have abandoned your work. We are well
Mm-hmm.
aware that individuals may be in the hospital um, and they're not able to obtain a sickness claim, but they should a loved one should still notify the employer so that the employer knows that this person is in a situation that they cannot obtain the certificate at present. Now, for many years, we are well aware that doctors give two yellow forms. This was never a requirement in that the the employee can
Yes.
request, and they're more popular now, a certificate, a white certificate from the employer, which does not contain cause of illness, because
Mm-hmm.
we are well aware of social media and where that information can end up. But the individual has a responsibility to obtain the yellow one from the medical practitioner. Um, and while you have 3 days to submit it to your employer, you have 1 year to submit it to national insurance. After 1 year, national insurance is under no obligation to honor that claim. And there are
Okay.
many persons who have suffered, especially government officers, who I'll get in that discussion another thing, but the individual is being paid as a temporary officer and have received more income than the 14 days allowed, sent the claim to the workplace, to the government department, and they have just held it, not knowing that they should have sent it to the National Insurance Department. So even though it comes from a government department, after a year, um, National Insurance is under no obligation to honor that claim. Now,
Yes.
when you obtain the claim from the doctor, um, you are the person who determines what that claim can be used for. I'm sorry I did not have this slide available, but the yellow sickness, that the yellow form, I'm referring to it as a medical certificate. The yellow form,
Mm-hmm.
there are three questions on that form. A, accident or bodily disablement in the course of employment. B, accident not work related. C, illness. In other words, there are three options.
Mm-hmm.
And the individual, you are the person who determines which you're going to use that form for. B and C are basically the same. So
Yes.
that if, in your opinion, this is not in the doctor's opinion, this is not in your employer's opinion, if in your opinion, what is wrong with you is work related, then you should take A.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, so I'm going to be dealing with the sickness claim first. Um, just give me 1 minute. Right, the sickness claim first. In that, if what you is wrong with you is not work related, then and the doctor would have specified on the claim um, what is wrong with you, then it's very important to make sure you fill that form out completely, making sure that you put your current address, a number that you can be reached at during working hours. Um, and if you're going to put a cell phone, make sure you have money on your phone. Because very often staff members try to reach individuals during working hours, and it's difficult or sometimes impossible to reach that person where they need further information to process that claim. And it can be very time consuming for a staff member to try to reach an individual. Okay. And sometimes with because there's no provision on the claim for a number for the workplace, therefore, you can even sometimes call some workplaces because there's not a listing in the directory. So once you submit that claim, then it means that um, for the first 3 days of that claim, if the claim is less than 2 weeks, you're not paid for the first 3 days. I'm going to repeat that. If the
Mm.
claim is less than 2 weeks, you're
Yes.
not paid for the first 3 days, which are considered waiting days. Now, so for argument's sake, you could have a claim for 1 week, you're not paid for the first 3 days. You do not resume work, and you have an additional 1 week. Well, you would have been paid for the first 3 days on the first claim because you did not return to work. Then when the second claim is paid, you'll be paid for that full claim and the 3 days that you were not paid on the first claim. So you do not lose. So once the claim is more than than two less than 2 weeks, you're not paid for the first 3 days. Now, um, you are paid sickness benefit for a total of 52 weeks,
Yeah.
365 days. Now, and this is for persons in the private sector and for government temporary officers. They are
Okay.
paid from national insurance. For government appointed officers, and I'm speaking about government appointed officers in the in the general service, because there are individuals who are appointed to a board, but they are regarded with the National Insurance Department as regular employees, like some person at K Shepherd and wherever else. Okay, BRA, National Sports Council, National NCC, all those other boards, Child Care Board, they are now
Mm-hmm.
classified as regular since 2019 when this government took over. Okay, and that's another discussion. But sufficient that an appointed officer qualifies for 1 year's salary. So while he does not qualify for sickness benefit because they pay a lesser percentage, he's paid for 1 year's salary.
1 second.
Well,
Somebody's asking here, 1 year from which date?
okay, with okay, if I'm speaking of the private sector, I'm going back to the private sector. Now,
Yes.
it can be 1 year straight, a calendar year, not a calendar, a 1 year straight,
Mm-hmm.
or if the claims are separated by less than 13 weeks, it is considered a link claim. So you could have a claim and you had, say, 2 months, and you return to work for a week and you're back off, it continues. But if
Ah,
you return to work for more than um, the 13 weeks, it would mean then that you qualify for more days. So once the claims are separated in less than 13 weeks, the days continue, so it could stretch over a longer period than a 52 weeks period. You want what I'm saying? Okay?
yes.
Right. So as I said, so you're entitled to 1 year's sick leave from the National Insurance Department, while as an appointed government officer, you are entitled to 1 year's salary.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've reached that 1 year's salary as an appointed government officer, then you are entitled to 6 months at half pay. And after that, you will need to be medically boarded. But that's not the conversation for tonight because we have a lot to deal with in this short space of time. So let's get back to the sickness benefit. So once you receive that form, make sure that so that in the slide, it would have indicated that, just give me 1 minute here. Right. Um, if you look at the slide 8, all right. You look at slide 8, um, it says that you are not um, you're not entitled to sickness benefit while you are on holiday. So if you're the form asks, the form asks if you're on holiday now, but there are some employers who pay employees. Now there's no legislation which requires any employer to pay any employee for not even 1 day sick leave. That's been a common law practice that we've had for many years. There are negotiated agreements between employers and employees, or employers and trade unions representing employees, where they may grant 6 days as a temporary officer, 14 days as an appointed officer, 1 year. But but there's some employers that will pay an employee while they're off, and there are different arrangements whereby the employee refund the employer for the check that was paid at national insurance. There are other arrangements where the employer may choose not to pay the individual. When you get the check, you bring to the employer and they make up the difference. So the different arrangements, but again, these are only arrangements. But if the employee is paid, it meant that national insurance will be deducted from the person's salary and they're given a credit. And therefore, um, the credits, in other words, for the purpose of calculating that benefit, if the average weekly salary is, say, $400, then they are given a credit of $400, and credits can be used for both qualifying and for sickness benefit, injury benefit, pension, and old age pension, not for maternity. And I've been arguing this case now for over 19 years, and I'm hoping that shortly that this will be done. But those credits are added so that there's the myth that the period of sick leave that you would have had during your working life will reduce your pension. That is only a myth, because the credits issued during your working life whether it be for sickness, unemployment, maternity, will be added once you have the number of contributions to qualify for the pension. So, therefore, you're not paid for sickness benefit when you are on holiday. Okay. And as I said, employers have different arrangements. Now, going quickly to the employment injury, which is the one that is um, very technical, and this is where many persons lose out on benefits, because they are the normal injuries whereby a person has a cut, a fall, whatever else, a particular day, a particular time, and so forth. But there are a number of occupational injuries which individuals suffer from and are not aware, and sometimes employers will tell them that you cannot qualify for employment injury. And let me just go through a couple of them. There is carpal tunnel, which would have occurred over a period of time. A lot of persons that suffer with low back pains, respiratory tract infections, because there are a lot of sick buildings and so forth. So that if in your opinion you are suffering from an injury, then I would suggest that you notify your employer when you start to experience it. You may even need to go as far as putting it in writing, because the person that you report it to today may not be there tomorrow, or the person might not communicate that to the HR department. So it's advisable sometimes to put this information in writing, because once an employment injury case arises, then it means that a report has to be sent to the employer for confirmation. So let me get back then to the other areas of injuries, and there is the mental injury, and I can go as far back as when a police officer accidentally shot a gentleman in the river terminal many years ago. He would have qualified for um, employment injury because it was a medical injury. 2 years ago, more recent, unfortunately, there was a worker who was killed on the at the port with a container. The operator of the crane would have made a claim for employment injury, and it's interesting in that case because he had made a claim for sickness and was not aware it would have been a claim for, it could be a claim for injury. So when I found out and I spoke to him, I had to help him to, to get the relevant form from national insurance to upgrade his claim from sickness to injury. So therefore, that's where this program is so necessary for the education of individuals. And therefore, you have the mental side of it. And as a result, while for a sickness benefit, um, you must have had at least 7 paid or credited contributions in the relevant quarter. And the relevant quarter being, for argument's sake, we are in the quarter of April to June. That relevant quarter will be the penultimate quarter, October to December. So you have to have at least 7 weeks paid or credited. In other words, you would have had to have worked 7 weeks in that period, or a combination of working and receiving benefits in that quarter of 7 weeks to qualify. For injury, it's totally different. You could have just gone on to the job the first day. Once you have been granted that job, once you are injured, then you can make a claim and can qualify for employment injury. I'm going to give you 2 classic cases. There was the guy who was electrocuted at, there was glacier ice a couple of about 2 years ago. I think that was his 3rd day on the job. And then there was another case many years ago where a truck was going around the roundabout at 6 rows. It overturned, and there was one young man that died, 2 others who were on top of the mile. They were they were hurt, and that was their first day on the job. So you don't have to have been working once the employer has indicated that the person was doing what they were supposed to do on the report, and therefore national insurance can make the decision that it is an employment injury. So there are other injuries that sometimes are considered gray areas, but I always advise an individual, once in your opinion, what is wrong with you is um, the work related, then make a claim. Now, as much as national insurance need that report from the employer to support your claim, there are many cases where employers have either determined it did not work, it didn't happen at their workplace, or the information being communicated to the HR has been absent, and therefore the employer is not able to support that information.
Yes.
Now, there is legislation which grants the person the right to bring two witnesses, and I'm saying two witnesses, to what would have happened, to provide written affidavits that they saw, witness, they are aware of the injury. Now, I always advise persons to be very careful asking your friend, because if the employer said it didn't happen at the workplace, and by way of that report, yes, that affidavit should be private and confidential at the National Insurance Department, but I
Mm-hmm.
would not sit here and say that everything is always confidential. We're dealing with human beings. And therefore, your friend who provides the affidavit, that may get into the hands of the employer. And therefore, while you keep your job, your friend may lose theirs for supporting you. So be very, very careful, when
Wow.
you're asking your friend to support what is wrong with you. And I'm going to give you a classic case of also knowing who your employer is.
But
Now,
before you go there, there's a question here.
certain,
Somebody asking about what about if you're temporary employed?
for national insurance purposes, the only temporary employee is a person working in the government service. Not even, in other words, there's a category for temporary workers, but the rate of contribution is the same as that for a person in the private sector. Now, a person may be temporary and could be temporary for the next 5 years.
Ah,
Okay. In
okay.
other words, once you are working,
Mm-hmm.
you should insist that national is deducted from your salary, because the employer has a right to make the deduction, is responsible for the full contribution. They have a right to deduct it at the time the salary is paid. If the employer failed to make that deduction and then it is reported to national insurance, the employer cannot make that deduction at a later time. It's still responsible for the full contribution. But if the employee does not notify national insurance when this is happening, and they come to national afterwards, national will treat it as collusion between the employee and the employer to defraud
Wow.
national insurance. So persons work and then they wait until things turn sour and then go to national insurance asking national to collect what was never deducted. So once you
Yeah.
start to work, make sure that national is being deducted. Okay. And even though the employer may say you are on probation, national does not regard any as probation. Once you're working for $21 per week or more, the employer is obligated to make deductions from your salary. So the temporary matter does not does
Doesn't
not
matter. It doesn't
that
matter.
doesn't
It
matter in
doesn't
terms of
matter.
national insurance.
Well,
Okay,
we
so
have
go ahead.
we have 5 minutes because I know we had given some of your time to thing, and I
No
see
problem.
Marcia there
Okay,
waiting.
right.
But continue. Yes,
Okay,
five
I'm going to
minutes.
go very quickly. So that
Yes.
once you I was going to use another scenario where this guy, he was injured and he did not know who his employer was, because the person who he identified as his employer said, no,
Mm-hmm.
you were working for a subcontractor and not for us. And therefore, in that particular case, I'm certain that that guy would have got almost $500,000. I'm telling you, because he lost both hands in that accident, okay,
Mm-hmm.
on that work site many years ago. So once a person qualifies then for um, employment injury, then um, the individual can receive employment injury up to uh, 365 days from the date of the accident. Now, while the question was asked earlier about sickness, it can go past a 365 days period, for
Right.
injury, it ends at 365. At
Ah.
365, if you are still suffering from that injury, once it was approved, then you can make a claim for disablement. Now, with disablement, you can be sent to the doctor to be assessed. And once the doctor gives an assessment of 1% or over, then you
Mm-hmm.
can get what can be considered as employment injury, but what is referred to as increased disablement up now to 5 years from the date of that accident. In other words, an additional 4 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so and you are still working in between and so forth. Once you qualify for employment injury, then you also can make a claim for medical expenses and traveling in respect of that injury. Now,
Wow.
for medical expenses, that would be things like therapy, things like medication, um, doctor fees, and whatever else, both local and overseas. Now, if you have a case where the medical attention available is not available in Barbados, then your doctor would have to write a letter, provide you with a letter, sorry, to the CEO of the National Insurance Department, um, indicating that you're traveling overseas, and therefore, when you have paid your medical expense and you return to Barbados or they're sent back here, then National will consider if they will pay all or the majority or how much of that medical expense. If you're unable to travel alone, then whoever is traveling with you, the doctor would have to indicate that also. Then the airfare of that person will be considered. So both
Okay.
local and overseas traveling. Now, for traveling, there are four areas of traveling. I would just indicated the one in respect of overseas travel, but then if you're traveling by public transport, there's no need for a ticket because tickets are not provided by ZRs and minibuses. I'm not talking about transport buses, but if you're going for, say, some St. Lucie where you live for Oystins, there's not one bus service, so it'll be $7 going and $7 coming. So you would indicate on the form that you would collect to attach the receipts for the medical expenses, and therefore your claims, your yellow forms, and those would the traveling would be supported by those dates. If you're
Mm-hmm.
traveling by taxi, obviously it'll be a registered taxi with the license authority. Then you'll provide a relevant receipt. In other words, the tariff may be from say St. Lucie to Oystins, maybe say $100. Therefore, $100 going, $100 coming, a receipt from the taxi owner. If you're traveling by your private car, then you would indicate from, say, St. Lucie to Belleville, wherever else. National will use the Google Map to chart the distance, and then because you're going back home, then, or if you're going back home, it will be double, and therefore you will be paid $1.50 per kilometer. Now,
Yes.
this is where many public officers suffer because even though you cannot qualify for injury benefit and your salary, because an appointed officer cannot get sickness benefit, but they should apply for injury benefit so that their claim can be assessed in a timely manner, so that if they have a claim for disablement, because the next program I'm going to be dealing with invalidity and disablement. Okay, there's a difference, and persons do not, they mix them up. So that public officers very often do not make claims for employment injury because you cannot get your salary and the employment injury from national insurance. But it's important for the claim to be assessed so that you can have a refund of your medical expense and your traveling for life in respect of that injury. So
Yes.
that I'll go back over very quickly. Once you go to the doctor, you obtain the two different types of paperwork. The
Yeah.
work one from your employer, submit it within the 3-day period to national insurance within the 1 year period. Once that claim, you receive that claim, you determine whether it's used for sickness or for injury. You're paid 60 and 2/3% for sickness, 90% for injury.
Sure.
The injury claim must be supported by either a report from the employer or um, affidavits. If there's no employment injury report or affidavits, then you will be paid sickness benefit and you cannot receive medical expenses and traveling. So, Madam Principal,
Listen, this has been honestly, I'm serious. I'm like some of this I remember hearing from Caswell, but then you've added a whole lot. You've added more on this because he had started to teach us all of this. But somebody has a question here, and I see Miss Myrie is waiting. Someone says, if contracted workers get injured on the job, can anything be put in place for such workers?
Now, self-employed people, persons, even though they pay contributions, they cannot receive employment injury. Now,
Mm-hmm.
a person who is a contract worker might be deemed based on the contract that they have that they are actually employees. And that's another story because there's the legal um, opinion on this matter, whether there is a contract for service and a contract of service. So
Mm-hmm.
you need to know about where there's doubt. Once you start to work and you have doubt about your status, go to national insurance. You're busy, yes, but go to national insurance so that national insurance can give guidance to you as an employee, a worker. The employer, you may need to go to nationals also, because you may determine this person is self-employed, but then
Yes.
the person might have been employed by you, and you might not liable for the full contribution. So the contract, there are different types of contract, but definitely if you are deemed self-employed by the
Mm-hmm.
National Insurance Department, then you do not pay towards the employment injury fund, and you cannot receive employment injury, but you can receive sickness benefit.